Hello NFL fans and welcome back to the Wall of NFL channel. In this video today I'm going to be talking about the playoff race and which teams I think are going to be able to get there and what maybe teams need to improve on as they try and fight to get in. So starting off with the Patriots in the AFC, they're actually sitting at #1 seed despite having a really bad start to the season. They're 9-4, the same record as the Titans and the Chiefs, both at the second and third in the AFC. But I think the Patriots kind of maybe should be at the #1. They are topping the lot. Maybe there's an argument for the Chiefs that should be #1, but I think the Patriots really do deserve being at the top where they are. They're very efficient offensively, and even though they don't have a big game-breaking talent they're not really a big play offense, but they run the ball very well, as you saw in the game against Buffalo Bills, where Mac Jones only had to throw it 3 times. But he's so efficient as well, Mac Jones. He's currently 3rd or 4th in the league in terms of completion percentage by starting quarterbacks, and he's just implementing the Patriots offense really, really well and is looking fantastic, by far and away the best rookie quarterback this season so far. So I think the Patriots have a really good chance. Of course, they are the #1 seed at the moment. They're pretty much for sure going to get into the playoffs. I mean, in terms of their division, they're ahead of the Bills, who are 7-6, and they've got a couple of... they're playing each other again. So if the Patriots just win that one, that basically solidifies them in the playoffs. The Titans are 2nd in the AFC, and they're really not looking like they should be there at all. I know, of course, they're winning games, and they did shut out the Jaguars last week. They was only the Jaguars, but they're really struggling offensively without Derrick Henry. Ryan Tannehill is looking very standard, and without Derrick Henry, they're just a very average offense. Of course, they play very hard defensively, and they have got a great head coach in Mike Vrabel. And they don't really quite have the talent that other teams around them have. It doesn't look like the Julio Jones trade in the offseason has really paid off for them, because he can't really stay healthy or get on the field. And A.J. Brown is having a year where he's finding it hard to get on the field as well, what with COVID and injuries and such. So I think without Derrick Henry, they're really going to struggle. But if they can get into the playoffs, and I'm pretty sure that they will, as they are sitting 9-4 at the moment, Derrick Henry should then come back, and they may well look back to their normal selves. So again, maybe like the Patriots, might win a game or 2. So far, I don't think their schedule is looking very tough. They've got the Steelers next week, who are on a bit of a run and have been playing well as of late, especially in the 4th quarter. But I think the Titans will be able to give them a really good game, and they'll probably end up coming out with the win. The Kansas City Chiefs are probably the hottest team in the AFC at the moment. Patrick Mahomes is kind of getting back to where he is, although weirdly enough, I would say he's currently the weakest part of that team. It's the defense that's really carrying the Chiefs at the moment. In the last few games, I think in the last 3 games, they haven't given up more than 10 points, which is just insane. And over the last 8 games, they have been impeccable defensively. I think that Patrick Mahomes really does need to work on spreading the ball to other receivers other than Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. And if he's able to do that and kind of look the way he did in his MVP season and in the year after when they won the Super Bowl, I think that the Chiefs are going to be unstoppable yet again. I know they didn't look so great at the start of the season, but they look very different now to how they looked back then. So I wouldn't be surprised if they actually finished at the #1 seed in the AFC, and they may well be the team to beat. Now onto the Baltimore Ravens, and despite the fact that they are 4th seed at the moment and top of the AFC North, they've really not been looking very good as of late. They've really struggled to get points on the board, and now Lamar Jackson might be missing a week or 2 with his ankle injury that he sustained against the Cleveland Browns. And even last week when Lamar Jackson was on the field, they had nothing against the Cleveland Browns. And the Cleveland Browns aren't even in the playoffs at the moment. They're currently sitting at 8th. So I'm pretty sure that the Ravens, they're just going to keep on taking losses here and there. And despite being so well coached and actually having a fair bit of talent offensively and on the defensive line, I think that they will struggle, and especially if they get into the playoffs. And their reliance on Lamar Jackson is so high, and the fact that he hasn't been throwing the ball very well and moving the ball down the field with his arm, I think that means they're going to continue to struggle. Of course, they lost to the Steelers as of late, and they lost to the Browns, so maybe they might even not win their division in the end. It looks like, based on their first half of the season record, that they will probably make the playoffs, but it's going to be a tall order as to whether they win a game or not in the playoffs, because when they come up against really tough teams to beat, they're going to struggle mightily. The LA Chargers have a massive game coming up this Thursday up against the Kansas City Chiefs, and that game will decide who sits top of the AFC West. The two teams will have an even record, but the Chargers will have done the double over the Chiefs, and based on head-to-head record, they will sit top. And the Chargers have had a really mixed bag of a season so far. They've had a really great start, and Justin Herbert looked insane. He was distributing the ball amazingly, especially to Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler looked fantastic as well. But the defense really struggled in those middle few weeks of the season, and they took a few losses against the Ravens and the Patriots, who are currently ahead of them in the AFC at the moment. I think that Ravens one is going to be a really big deal when it comes down to where teams are going to be seeded when it gets to the playoff times, because both the Ravens and the Chargers at the moment are both sitting 8-5. But Justin Herbert, he is the difference maker, and he has been amazing this season so far. Justin Herbert is 4th in passing yards this season with 3,822, and he's got over 30 touchdowns for the second season running, and he's the first quarterback to ever do that in his first 2 seasons. He is unbelievable, and I can't say enough good things about Justin Herbert. In fact, he looks like the best quarterback in the AFC West at the moment. So whilst the Chargers have a lot of holes defensively, and that's where they need to improve, I still think they'll make the playoffs because they have such a talented quarterback in Justin Herbert, and the weapons that they have on offense are just magnificent as well. The fact that if the season ended today, the Colts would be in the playoffs is quite amazing when you remember that they started the season 1-5 and were just really bad to start the season. I know they had a really tough schedule at the start, and also Carson Wentz had to kind of get in and kind of get used to being on a new team. And that's quite a difficult thing for a lot of players. Of course, Tom Brady even struggled towards the start of the season last year as well. So the fact that they're at 7-6 and fighting in those playoffs is a really good sign for the Colts. Defensively especially, they have been absolutely fantastic, especially Darius Leonard at linebacker. I think he's been the best linebacker in the NFL this season. The Colts altogether have 29 turnovers, which is a very key statistic when it comes to who's going to win which game. And giving those extra possessions to an offense, no matter how good it is going to be a real blessing. And that's one of the reasons that the Colts are sitting 7-6, despite that 1-5 start to the season. Carson Wentz has also looked pretty good over the last few weeks as well. He has only 5 interceptions on the year, and he's looking a lot better than he did last year. So I think the Colts are going to keep on getting those wins as they go towards the playoffs. And maybe, who knows, maybe they will get a win or two in the playoffs as well, because they seem to be one of those teams this year that are kind of hitting their hot streak later on into the season. The Buffalo Bills have been struggling a little bit as of late. They've now lost 2 games on the trot to the Patriots and the Buccaneers. Whilst it is okay to lose to both of those teams, they have kind of abandoned the run game almost completely. They've just been airing it out as much as possible, and even in a game where it was virtually impossible to throw against the Patriots with over 50-mile-per-hour winds, they still threw the ball, and it kind of shows that, the Patriots won that game because I think they played the game a little bit smarter. I know Patriots have a rookie quarterback, and Josh Allen is probably one of the best in the league, but I think that they really need to work on that running game, because if they don't, they're going to be very easy to stop, as the Buccaneers showed this weekend. The Buccaneers would blitz on almost every play, and it really made it difficult for Josh Allen, and that running game was never able to be established. So I think that the Buffalo Bills, whilst they have got a phenomenal team, a phenomenal head coach, I think they are just missing that running game. And if they get that integrated, who knows, maybe they will be a really good team and it's one of the teams to beat in the playoffs. I certainly thought at the start of the season the Bills probably could make it to the Super Bowl if they got all their pieces together. Now, there are two other teams that I think could make it into the playoffs. Of course, there are more that mathematically could, like the Steelers, Broncos, Raiders, and Dolphins, but I only think the Browns and the Bengals really have a chance of making it in. Both of those teams are 7-6, and the Browns, they actually have last year's Coach of the Year, and they have a fantastic defense with Myles Garrett, of course, heading that up. And also, they have a running game, which is, with Derrick Henry currently injured, that Browns running game is probably the best in the league. Nick Chubb has played really well, and their offensive line has been fantastic. And Kevin Stefanski has known exactly what run to call, and the coaching has been really fantastic for the Browns. I think the Bengals have just as good of a chance, in fact, maybe a little bit less if I had to put money on it. But the Bengals, they have a fantastic quarterback in Joe Burrow, much better than Baker Mayfield, and a running game which is really well balanced with that passing attack. And I've got to say, the one thing that I can describe the Bengals offense with is balance. Zach Taylor has done a really good job at implementing that balance, and I think that given another season, they would definitely be in the playoffs, but maybe it's a little bit too early and they don't quite have enough depth on their rosters to be able to get that final push and get into the playoffs. Currently, I don't think that they deserve to be in over any of the other teams that are currently in those wildcard positions that we've already talked about. So I think that maybe they miss out on it this year. So now on to the NFC, and starting off with the Packers at the number 1 seed. It is talked about that they are the best team in the league at the moment, and I think I'm inclined to agree. They have a lot of starters out injured at the moment, and they are still rolling teams. They looked fantastic against the Bears this weekend. The Bears, they had a few big plays that scored them touchdowns, like of course their special teams was really good with the returns this week, but the Packers looked so good offensively, with Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones, and of course AJ Dillon with that really good two-headed running attack. I just think that with Aaron Rodgers as well being at the top of his game, they're really unstoppable on offense. And not to mention defensively, they've played really well as well. Considering all of the players that they have out injured, I think they've done a great job to be sitting at number 1 seed at the moment. And I think they're probably the team to beat. Maybe the Buccaneers are nipping at their heels a little bit though. So speaking of the Buccaneers, I think it's plain and simple, Tom Brady makes that team what it is. Tom Brady is looking like he's going to be the MVP this year for I think it's the 5th time, and he has had an excellent season. He's currently top in the league in terms of passing yards. He's also top in the league in touchdowns, and he's 44 years old. So I think he's done a phenomenal job to carry this team. He's got some fantastic red zone targets in Gronkowski and Mike Evans, but also he's got Godwin and, well, if he ever comes back, Antonio Brown to move the chains down the field. And Leonard Fournette is really coming into his own as well. So I think the Buccaneers have a really, really good chance to make it into the playoffs. And you know what? In the playoffs, Tom Brady's a different animal. Even though he's had one of the best seasons of his career, he's going to step it up again in the playoffs because he does that every single year. So I think when the Buccaneers do make it to the playoffs, they're definitely going to be one of those teams in the NFC Championship game. And I think it's probably going to be against the Packers in the NFC Championship game to decide who goes to the Super Bowl. The Cardinals, after their loss against the Rams this weekend, are sitting at the 3rd seed in the NFC. I think they are definitely one of the teams to beat though, and those top 3 teams, Cardinals, Buccaneers, Packers, are really going to fight it out to see which of those 3 get into the championship game. If I was going to say that one team's going to miss out, I think it would be the Cardinals, because maybe they don't quite have the depth of squad that the Buccaneers and the Packers do as well, and maybe their head coach Cliff Kingsbury isn't quite the same level as Matt LaFleur, and of course Bruce Arians is at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think that the Cardinals may well miss out on the championship game, but they're definitely making it to the playoffs. I don't know if they're going to lose another 1 or 2 and maybe lose their top NFC West seed to the Rams, but I think that they are still probably maybe a little bit better than the Rams because they've had such a great season so far. The connections between Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins is one that the whole league is jealous of. Kyler Murray's fantastic when he scrambles, and DeAndre Hopkins' hands, they're just like glue. So I think that those two on the field have been phenomenal. And combining that with their ever improving run game with James Conner, I think they're really, really tough to beat. So kudos to the Rams for stopping them in week 14, but the Cardinals, man, they're going to be a tough team to beat in the playoffs as well. The Cowboys are the fourth and final team at the top of their division in the NFC, and deservedly so. No other team in the NFC East can come anywhere close to the Cowboys. They are definitely the best team in that division. They have the second best offense in the league in terms of points scored and yards gained. They have a two-headed monster backfield, Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. And their wide receivers, Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb, when the three of them have been on the field, they've been almost unstoppable. And I've got to say their defense is much improved on last year as well. Micah Parsons has over 75 tackles and 10 sacks, I think, this season, and he's been really fantastic. Randy Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence on the defensive line have also been phenomenal, and not to mention Trayvon Diggs, who leads the league in interceptions on the back end in the secondary. I think that team defensively, whilst they have let up a lot of yards in recent weeks, they really do get the ball back to the offense, and there's no wonder that they are sitting 4th seed in the NFC with a 9-4 record. And I think that they're definitely going to make the playoffs. I think they may well be a little bit of a glass cannon, so I'm not sure how far they'll last. I think they'll just get to the divisional round of the playoffs, but I do think they have been really good this year, and the future's looking very bright for a young roster. The Rams lost all their games in November, so they were on a bit of a downward spiral, but they managed to turn that round with a big win against the Jaguars and an even bigger win against the Cardinals, because the Cardinals were higher than them in the NFC West. So the Rams winning that game is a big statement, and I think that now, in December, they are really coming into their own. Since Thanksgiving, they've gotten a lot better. Matthew Stafford in the last 2 games has over 600 yards and 6 touchdowns as well, and he's just been phenomenal these last 2 games. In the season as well, he has around 3,900 yards and 33 touchdowns with 9 interceptions. He is having a really good year, and I think that that's going to get even better now that he's had 14-15 games under his belt with the LA Rams. I think that the LA Rams defensively as well, with Aaron Donald, who got a massive 3 sacks against the Cardinals. He has looked really good, and he just won the NFC Defensive Player of the Week award. So I think that team is getting better and better and better, and I don't think they conceded a single penalty against the Cardinals. That was a real clinic, and I think that now going into the playoffs, they're probably one of the hottest teams, and whilst they are not quite as good as the Cardinals, Buccaneers, and the Packers, they could beat one of those teams if they get on a hot streak, and I think they are definitely going to be one of those teams to beat. The 49ers have gone on real streaks this season. They've won a few games, lost a few games, and it's kind of been quite streaky for them. So I think they're going through a good spell at the moment, despite the fact that they lost to the Seahawks a couple of weeks ago. They did get a big win against the Bengals this weekend, another team that was still in the playoffs a week ago when they played them. So the 49ers, they have got a really good team, I think, with Jimmy Garoppolo, who's maybe not the best quarterback, but he knows exactly who to give the ball to. Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, who are just phenomenal weapons. They also have a pretty good offensive line, headed up by Trent Williams, who's had a really good year, and defensively as well, their linebacking core is probably one of the best in the league. I think that this team is always going to be tough to beat for whoever they come up against, but I don't think they will get too far when's all said and done. I think the 49ers and the next team I'm going to talk about, the Washington football team, are just a tier below the Rams, Cowboys, Cardinals, Packers, and Buccaneers. And if any team's going to fall out of playoff contention from the teams that are already in it, it's going to be the 49ers and the Washington football team. This 7th seed, owned by the Washington football team, is a really tricky one. The Washington football team had a terrible start to the season, and they were just dreadful, to be quite honest. They don't really deserve to be in the playoffs, I don't think. But then when you think about who's going to take their place, the Vikings, Eagles, Falcons, or Saints, and then the list goes on because, the Washington football team is 6-7, so a lot of teams below them can get in. But I don't think any of the other teams deserve to be in it. I think the 49ers do, but below that, it's a really tough call. I think the Vikings are going to be a team that gets in, probably ahead of the Washington football team by the end of the season. but who really knows, because they just seem to be throwing games away in the fourth quarter this season. So I think it's going to be a real smash and grab for whichever team gets that 7th seed. Again, I don't think the Washington football team really deserve to be in, though their defense has been really good, and Antonio Gibson the last few weeks has kind of carried that offense. But it means that if their defense has played so good, it means the offense only needs 1 or 2 good drives to win the game. So I think that the Washington football team, they probably won't get in when it's all is said and done. And I think it would be the Vikings instead. But who really knows? I mean, any team who's currently 6-7 is able to get in the playoffs at the moment. So I don't think that says an awful lot about how good the Washington football team are. So thank you guys so much for watching my video on who I think is going to make the playoffs and how good the chances are for each team, and kind of my thoughts on each team's weaknesses. I don't really know, but I was just talking about who's going to make the playoffs. Thank you guys so much for watching it. Please also check out wallofnfl.com for live scores while the games are going on, and exclusive articles, and of course breaking news as well. And also check out our social media pages, Wall of NFL on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and TikTok. And also comment down below which teams you think are going to make the playoffs. I would love to hear what you guys think.